Hi, this time I'm going to talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is Le Pacte de Loup, Brotherhood of the Wolf. I wanted to talk about this movie because I somewhat recently reviewed the player's manual and presenter's manual of Ghastly Affair, the role playing game. If you haven't seen my review of those manuals, I'm going to put the relevant links on this video so that you can go and check them out. Brotherhood of the Wolf is going to serve as a great source of inspiration for that RPG because Brotherhood of the Wolf happens a bit before the French Revolution, and the Ghastly Affair RPG allows you to play around that time. Brotherhood of the Wolf is mostly an action film. It also contains significant elements of mystery, romance. It's also a bit of a thriller. It has intrigue, conspiracies, a bit of horror. So I think that watching Brotherhood of the Wolf will help you better portray the type of atmosphere or flavor that the Ghastly Affair RPG asks of you. I'm going to talk about this movie without giving too much, without revealing major spoilers. I'm just going to focus on some very mild things related to some of the main characters. I'm going to avoid talking about most of the characters in the movie because I think that giving too much information about them could spoil the mystery or the secrets behind the plotline. This movie does an excellent job at making you feel like you are actually in that period and that place. It really feels like Europe at some of its darkest or most decadent moments, perhaps even bloody moments, you could say. You always have that dark sky. The sun rarely rears its head trying to shed some light upon that dark land. It's almost always raining. It's really dark in its environment. There are very cold colors throughout the entire film. And you can see so many things that plague the land. Now, this movie, well, in a sense, you could say it's a dark fantasy film, but it has its roots on some historical moments, in real life. So you can see how there is a bit of a. You can see the conflicts between the nobles and the commoners, how there is quite a bit of injustice, and the nobles have already forsaken their noblesse oblige type of philosophy. You can see only a few nobles that are actually worried or doing something for the land and the people. Most of them are quite decadent. You can also see some degenerate moments of the noblemen there. And you can see how religion has this iron grip. This is when people were not allowed to think beyond certain limits, and when religion was in its most lethal aspects to be used as a tool. I mean, today we still have that, but back then you could really see the iron grip of the church over the entire land. So I think the film, through its music, through the acting, of course, of the people involved, they really express that bleak environment. The main characters are two men sent by the king. If I'm not mistaken, it should have been Louis XV. I'm not sure. If someone knows better, I think it's about a decade before the French Revolution. If someone knows better, please correct me in the comments below. And the main characters are Chevalier de Fonsac and Manu. Now, Manu is a very interesting character because he is basically an American warrior. He seems to be like the last survivor of his warrior tribe. So he travels across Europe. This happens in France more than anything, or the outskirts. I'm not exactly sure about the geography. And he travels with Fonsac. And they have a sort of like a blood brother relationship. And it's a really nice contrast because Manu, being like you could say sort of like a shaman, makes a very good balance against the more um, scientific, at times materialistic approach of Fonsac. Fonsac is an naturalist. He studies nature. He's an expert at different types of animals. He's also quite skilled at identifying issues related to cryptozoology. That is, is very good at spotting frauds and anything that has to do with tricking the senses when trying to create a facade of some mysterious or strange animal. Because these two men have been sent to investigate a number of killings. There have been several deaths related to the legendary beast of Gévaudan. You know, probably the most famous werewolf in history. And this beast attacks more than anything women and children. It can also kill men, but it focuses more on women and children, and it goes it does the deed. It kills people and it disappears. And so Fronsac and Manu need to see what's behind all of this. You don't really get too much of a sense of what Manu is is thinking about the entire affair, but you get a pretty clear picture of what Fronsac is thinking. He believes that there is some evil person or some group behind it all, sort of like Scooby Doo. They try to create this trickery or facade of there's this werewolf, but it's probably like some other thing, some plan where they need this supernatural creature or boogeyman to serve as a curtain behind what's really going on. In fact, the film has quite a bit of gore in it. Not too much, but the killings are somewhat brutal. So this is obviously not a film for immature audiences. There are also some sex scenes, nothing too explicit, and some of the most degenerate aspects of European nobility are displayed here as well. The first scene, you can see how there is quite a bit of danger on the road. You basically get no protection unless you're of noble blood. And something that really helps express the heroism of Fonsac and Mani is that they are both expert martial artists. I'm not talking about just brawling. I'm talking about this film is quite over the top in its choreography. And I think at first I thought, oh, this almost makes no sense. But there are a couple of things in favor of this choice. Because, for example, American warriors are probably some of the best skilled fighters, in my opinion, in the past. I don't know what, at the present there probably are. I've known some knife fighters that are pretty skilled. So it makes sense that Manu brought some techniques from America. But on the other side of things, I was just talking with Marco from Multiverso Distópico. That is, I wrote a comment in one of his recent videos where I told him that I forget the name of the book. I think it was Secrets of the Samurai by Oscar Arati, where he mentions that some people actually traveled, so that is Japanese and Chinese, sometimes traveled to the West to test their skills. Sometimes they hired themselves as servants or workers, and while they kept practicing their martial arts and tested themselves against the dangers of the road, so to speak. So it makes sense that Fonsac and Manu developed this martial art style of fighting, and it also gives, within the fictional pulpy feeling that some of the battles get, it also adds a hint of realism, because if you were just like a brawler trying to hit without putting some thought into where you are going to strike, into controlling your breathing, into without previous training, a more, let's say, technical approach, it would have been impossible to survive a fight against 2 or 3 opponents. But here you're going to see Manu and Fonsac fighting against several opponents and at times. And of course, do not expect the battles to be too realistic, because these battles are more than anything. They are there to make you like, wow, they're going to be kind of like superhero fights, to put it in a way. Not that exaggerated. You're not going to see the characters punching through walls. But what I mean to say is that they are just superbly skilled in martial arts. And the fights are also quite artsy. For example, besides, despite the putting aside the camera shots and the angles, there are some pretty cool flourishes related to sound. Because, for example, there is this scene where Manu is using like a quarter staff to fight against a group of thugs, and when he beats them all, he kind of flourishes his quarter staff, and in the background you can hear thunder, like it almost feels like Thor approves or something. So that's really cool. And so the fights are really exciting, and I'm glad in the DVD you see some of the deleted scenes, and I'm glad they took those scenes out of the movie, because otherwise the battles would have overstayed their welcome, in my opinion, and they would have felt less realistic within the fictional context. Because, for example, in the first fight, there is a really it's quite clear, I think it was in the collarbone or some really vulnerable area, where Manu kicks his opponent, and you know, if you have a bit of experience with those situations, you know that someone is not going to get back from the type of blow that that person received. But if they had left those cut scenes, those the deleted scenes, it would have been too unrealistic that somebody just got his entire frontal bone shattered and that gets up almost like nothing. It would have been too ridiculous. So I'm glad that they took those scenes out. There's also quite a bit of the occult and spirituality mixed with the storyline of the film. You always get like small hints that there's something going on, something perhaps supernatural. You never get like a confirmation of it, but it's always there. Is a lot of symbolism related to wolves, because they do not understand what is going on with the beast of Javadan. They think that maybe they are just wild wolves killing people, killing peasants and commoners. So they start killing all of the wolves that they find, thinking that they're going to solve the problem like that. That's not, obviously not the case. But there is always like this white wolf, like in the background, sometimes just appearing and disappearing at times, and you kind of get the sense like it's some like protective spirit of the wolves or something. And on the other hand of things, things just sometimes happen too conveniently on the, let's say, on the bad guys side of things. So you can see like there is some sort of vile sorcery at work too. In fact, there is a really cool scene that I don't want to spoil things, but let's say a specific room is decorated quite in a very macabre style. I think that whoever designed that room did quite a bit of research on how perhaps some black magic type of room would look like. So it's a really creepy room, and that room, I think it represents a bit aesthetically, it represents the heart of the darkest sorcery in the film. So that's a bit of mystery and charm to the entire movie. Because it's always like that element of the occult or spirituality is always there, but you never really get a confirmation that it's actually like that. You could say, oh, it's just a coincidence when things happen, but you can see those forces moving behind the actions of the good guys and the bad guys, sometimes aiding them, sometimes hindering them. So that's really nice. I also like it that because of the shots of the camera and the way they guide you through the story, it actually feels like you are traveling with Chevalier Fonsac and Manu. It feels like you are entering those buildings, that you are approaching those ruins, going through forests and mountains. And when they arrive at different noble houses, you can see that environment of hostility, of double crossing, or presenting a facade of sorts, because you're going to see all those nobles. You know, it's that time of powdered wigs and all those, let's say, kind of effeminate way of dressing. So there are a lot of nobles like, oh, 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 shall we dance? You know, they look kind of like effeminate. So and but at the same time, you feel like those nobles are kind of like ready to backstab you at any moment. You don't know who is behind the attacks of the Beast of Javalan. So it kind of feels like when they are saying something like goodness or gracious or something, they are already thinking of doing something bad to you. So you actually feel like you are an agent at the service of King Louis, trying to figure out what is wrong, and you have to be on your guard at all time, because you don't know who of those nobles are somewhat related to what is going on. I also think that the movie does a pretty good job at exposing the vulnerability of the human heart. That is, if you do not keep your emotions in check, if you do not have like a balance between the mind and the heart, it could be your downfall. So maybe that's a part of the contrast of the film, that you see the raw savagery that you find in the wilderness making a contrast with refined manners and civilization. So you can see those that duality, and the main characters represent that mix of let's say the more rational man and the more animal man, and how they need to wield both of those forces as they try to unravel the mystery. And there are some fights that really feel like out of a comic book. They have many different adversaries. I'm just going to give you a small spoiler. There is actually a battle scene against the Gévaudan, but not everything is as it looks like. You must keep that in mind. And but you're always looking for that sense of wonder and the supernatural in those fight scenes, and some of those fight scenes seem almost impossible, sometimes surreal, and they feel like comic book fights. So I think Brotherhood of the Wolf is actually a great film, and it serves as great inspiration for any type of role-playing game that has to do with dark fantasy, the supernatural, especially if it happens during the time of the French Revolution. I think that those that like werewolf stories could potentially like it. It also depends on their attitude towards the fictional and the real. I think you will find both of those elements in satisfying quantities in this movie. I also like the acting of most of the characters, and how of the actors, and how some of them are just there to confuse you even more, and some of them offer those clues that you need to solve the mystery. Maybe you will be able to solve the entire mystery of the Gévaudan within the natural and supernatural elements. And definitely recommend that you watch Brotherhood of the Wolf, Le Pacte du Loup, and I recommend that you watch it on its on French language, because it's a French film, a French movie, and so you get I think the actors express things a lot better through French rather than, for example, in English. I think there's also a Spanish dubbed version. I'm not sure. So, but definitely watch it in French. It sounds it's more impressive in my opinion like that, because of the words, the expressions, and I think that some of the scenarios in Brotherhood of the Wolf could also serve as parallels to what we are experiencing today when it comes to the intrigue and conspiracies and degeneracy, and despite all of that, virtue shining above it all, or shining through the darkness of the entire conflict. Well, thanks for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.